And joining us for more on the spread of the Zika virus is ABC 7 health reporter Alex Redmond, Keith Fitzgerald, a professor of political science at New College of Florida, and Mark Latham, the director of Manatee County Mosquito Control District. And Mark, let me start with you. And if you could give us a brief update on where things stand in Manatee County, what are you seeing out there?
Well, we have 4 imported cases that have been confirmed by the health department.
And just so people understand, what does reported mean? I mean imported.
Imported means that they did not acquire the Zika virus within the state. They visited countries where the epidemic is ongoing, acquired the disease while they were there from a bite from a mosquito, and then came home, fell sick, and got tested. So they acquired it overseas, not in Manatee or Sarasota counties.
Now, some of what we've been talking about is whether local mosquito control are finding mosquitoes locally infected with the Zika virus. What do you see there?
Well, we're not actually testing for that because that is like looking for a needle in a haystack. I mean, trying to catch mosquitoes throughout the county and expect to find the Zika virus. Where they are finding it is where you'd expect to find it is where there's transmission ongoing, which is in Miami Beach, where they've found quite a few pools of mosquitoes that are positive for the virus.
And one more question. So give us the count in terms of local cases, and there's one outlier, you believe.
Right. The 3 of the cases are in local residents. One of the cases, which is attributed to Manatee County as an imported case, was actually a visitor from Puerto Rico who came and visited family in the Lakewood Ranch area.
And the state is not including that in the official numbers?
No, they are including that in the official numbers. It is that is the 4th one. So that's when we talk about 4 cases in Manatee County, that is the 4th one.
And Alex, I mean, you've been looking at this for so many weeks now. Are you getting the information that you need from the local health departments?
I am not. I have to be quite candid with you, Alan. When I went to the local health departments a couple of months ago, and I asked them where the women that were infected with the Zika virus lived, in what counties, they said, we can't give that to you because it is a case of their privacy. I said, well, I'm not asking for their addresses. I think that the public has a right to know that the counties that they live in. And of course, down the road, in the worst case scenario, if we end up with a bunch of babies being born with microcephaly or small heads, this will indeed be cause for concern. But people deserve to know what counties they're in so that if there does happen to be an outbreak, that they can make a choice of whether to be there or not, or take extra precautions.
All right, we're going to dig into more of that in a couple of moments. But Keith, what is the latest in terms of congressional funding for Zika research and action? Because as you saw in Alex's report, the federal authorities are basically out of money.
Well, and this is an outgrowth of an ongoing war about the budget. It's actually been going on in Congress for quite some time. This all has to do with the fact that we're on continuing resolutions, which is to say, rather than having a budget, we're funding the government by simply continuing previous levels. So the CDC doesn't have any slush fund of money to deal with any special problem that comes up. And they need a special appropriation, and Congress can't get the job done.
All right, why don't we take a break? Our roundtable will continue in a moment. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing the Zika virus with our roundtable. Alex Redmond is a health reporter for ABC 7 News. Keith Fitzgerald is a professor of political science at New College of Florida. And Mark Latham is the director of the Manatee County Mosquito Control District. Mark, you are doing a lot of spraying right now. What's been going on?
Right. Well, it was actually last week we did quite a bit of spraying in response to all the flooding that occurred from Tropical Storm Hurricane Hermine. We got over 10 inches of rain in various parts of Manatee County, which sparked off a huge brood of mosquitoes. And we had many complaints from the public asking us to come out and spray.
Panicked? Or?
Well, I wouldn't say panic, but they were saying, I mean, a lot of the folks were out in the east part of the county, and concerned about their livestock. Because, I mean, you walk into the grass and you get clouds of mosquitoes coming up. So we have to do something about it.
Now, are you using the product which some people have been concerned about in South Florida?
Yes, we're using Nailed or Dibrom. It is the most effective product we have. It has been used safely for for 40 to 50 years, and it's the most widely used product in the country.
While we were in the commercial break, you were pointing out that it's banned in Europe, but you're saying that we should not be concerned about that.
Right, it is a neurotoxin, and theoretically it's supposed to dissipate before it actually hits the ground. So it dissipates before it hits the ground, or it just is, it's such a small amount that is used.
Right.
But the thing is that we were talking about, well, if people knew, more people knew that the breeding ground, if you eliminate the breeding ground, you empty out all of your man-made containers, and you empty out all of the buckets and the tires, that you eliminate the breeding ground. These creatures are day biters, and they also bite within 100 to 300 feet at the most of where they breed. But I think the message may not be strong enough, because given the opportunity of having this neurotoxin sprayed or dumping out the water, I think more people might dump out the water.
All right, let's talk about what's happening or what's not happening in Washington. I was struck by something incredible, that the state is sending money to the Centers for Disease Control, which is a federal body, to move ahead with research. It really should not be that way. But Keith, I take it that you have an issue with what Governor Scott was saying in that interview there about the helpfulness, or his accusation that Senator Nelson has not been as helpful as he should be.
Well, first of all, you should interpret that comment against the backdrop of the fact that the governor is preparing a run against Senator Nelson for his seat. Senator Nelson is the most trusted politician in Florida politics. I've seen dozens of polls over the years that bear that out. The idea that suddenly he would just haul off and vote against Zika funding probably strikes people as sort of an incredible claim, and that's because it's a little bit partisan and downright ridiculous.
So what is going on here is the president asked for $1.9 billion in money to go for Zika research and searching for an answer to this problem. The $1.1 billion was passed by the U.S. Senate, but the House added cuts to Planned Parenthood, which it knew would be a showstopper for any Democrat in the House.
Right, and the way I think that you want to think about this is that if you were just setting politics aside, what you would like to do is do an asset map of all the tools at your disposal to intervene at points where you can actually make a difference in this. One of the ways this disease is spread is by sexual contact, and the government itself does not do a lot of delivery of health care, either at the federal or the state level, so it relies on other people who work on those issues. Planned Parenthood has an established capacity to distribute and educate on matters of birth control. So the original bill said, well, let's use that asset. That suddenly got tied up into all kinds of ideological debates about the other things that Planned Parenthood did, and then it was off to the races with politics.
But now we are in a, I dare say, a crisis situation in Florida. There have been plenty of calls by both Republicans and Democrats to pass a clean bill that does not cut Planned Parenthood.
Right.
Why isn't anything happening?
Well, and I would say our delegation is working across party lines to try to get things moving. And in fact, Senator Nelson had gotten some progress on this to try to get everybody to move past these politics. When the governor came up, a lot of people said he didn't help. But exactly, we ought to be looking at these issues from the standpoint of, we have a public health crisis, we ought to be dealing with that issue. But it gets tied up in larger political issues, and then you can't have a rational debate about it.
Now, another thing that Governor Scott was mentioning there was his concern about the impact on our tourism industry, which is the first or second largest industry in the state. Alex, do you think, you've had difficulty in terms of getting answers from the state health department, and there have been some comments made to you about trying to stay on message. Do you see that as an attempt to ratchet down concerns that might affect tourism?
Possibly, a great possibility, because what happened is after ABC 7, I personally placed more than a dozen phone calls to local health officials and asked them to go on camera with the numbers of Zika cases, more than a dozen calls, and I was informed by the local health department that no, we will not give you a person on camera. So then I further reached out to Tallahassee, and Tallahassee did respond saying the same thing the health department always says, which is please contact, we're happy to go on and speak of mosquito management and empty your containers and get rid of standing water, but we have to go through Tallahassee because we have to, a local health official in Sarasota said, stay on message. So that is of great concern because we need full disclosure, we need transparency, and the other concern is that the numbers are not accurate. I believe that they are considered to be weeks, possibly even months behind.
Why?
I think it's because it's being underreported, and tourists or possibly people that are coming into the country and getting with the infection and leaving with the infection are not being reported, and possibly things are just not being reported. I think they're slowing getting the numbers up, but no one will go on camera from our local health departments and speak of the numbers of people or of health concerns of Zika.
Mark, where do we go from here? Are you concerned about the numbers of cases here on the Suncoast continuing to go up?
No, I'm not. We are now very much on the downslope of the populations of our vector mosquito, Aedes aegypti, in this area. It is a tropical, subtropical species, and the populations we're seeing now are crashing. And it's to do with the fact that we're getting shorter day length, and when you get shorter day length, there is a stimulus that the egg will not hatch when there is too little day length.
Well, let me ask you two questions, and I would imagine hopefully the weather will continue to get to become cooler. Bob, we're going to ask you some questions about that. But would that only be a temporary respite? Will we be right back at it next spring?
If we use chikungunya as a model, I mean, it is a virus that was transmitted by the same mosquito, went through the Caribbean, was never had been seen before in the Western Hemisphere. It blew up in 1 year, huge number of cases like we're seeing with Zika in the Caribbean and Central America. Following year, it was not a problem at all.
So, Keith, do you see the deadlock breaking on Capitol Hill, or do the folks up there know exactly what we're saying here, that this is really kind of a short-term crisis?
Well, I think both. I think the money will come through, maybe belatedly, ironically, when the problem is starting to subside. This is not a winner for Congress, and we're now coming up to an election, so clearer heads will probably prevail pretty soon.
And Alex, what are you hearing out there in terms of the concern of people like that pregnant mom? Sure. That, I can imagine that some women might just be afraid to leave their home.
Absolutely. Speaking to people on the streets, people are frightened. But I believe that when you give people information, people are smart. And you give them information and you don't hide things from them. When they know the truth, then they're not as frightened because you're not hiding something.
So I would imagine that the most important thing that we could tell people tonight is if you have standing water in your backyard, in those planters or anything else, get rid of it.
That's what we've been telling them all along, and we wish they'd listen.
And safe sexual contact, because we preach abstinence in our schools. So in the event that somebody is infected and they do have sexual contact with somebody else.
All right, when we take a break. Welcome back. We're discussing the latest on the Zika virus with our roundtable. Time for final thoughts. And Mark, if you could let us know where we stand in terms of mosquitoes here on the Suncoast and whether people should be concerned about it.
The mosquitoes are on their way down. We're getting into the fall months, particularly the Aedes aegypti populations. I mean, they're dwindling. Although we shouldn't let our guard down, there's always still that chance of an imported case and then local mosquitoes picking it up from that imported case. So, but I would just tell everyone that things are quietening down now.
Good. Alex, Governor Scott gave a lot of information, as you saw there, but you still believe that the state health departments should be doing more.
Absolutely. When I emailed the state and requested a response as to why they wouldn't have a local health official speak, they said that the best person to speak would be the Surgeon General and the governor, and that they were in D.C., so they were unavailable to speak, and that they would be happy to talk to me about mosquito management, though, and I did tell them as well that I go to mosquito management for mosquito control.
Okay, and Keith, it almost seems unbelievable that we could have a public health crisis like this, and they're playing games on Capitol Hill about sending resources that are needed.
I think the real pathology here is less with the disease and more with the political system. and I mean that quite honestly. This is exactly the kind of thing where you should not be playing games, linking it to future campaigns, trying to zing the other party. Sometimes government should just be trying to get something done.
Because on one hand, Governor Scott has seemed like he's on top of this all, but then all of a sudden he's taking shots at the state's senior senator, and people are wondering what more is going on here.
Well, he's running for the next office, and meanwhile, our senator up there is one of the guys who actually does try to get things done. And this is a case where our delegation is behaving in a nonpartisan way. So I don't think he's helping, and he's not helping when he's telling people underneath him to shut down information because he wants to be on camera talking about it.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. But before we go, we want to share some viewer comments on last night's show. The number of heroin overdoses is reaching record levels here on the Suncoast, and the tragic consequence is that children are being left behind. So far this year, Manatee County is averaging 60 child removals per month, nearly triple the state average. Social service organizations are asking for foster parents to step up and meet the demand. Here is what some of our viewers are saying. Shauna Mikado writes, "These families need the community's help. Drugs are an illness and the families need help working through these addictions. Foster homes are beyond crowded and children are having to stay in group homes, which only furthers systemic trauma." Kelly Stearns writes, "Being a foster parent is very difficult while also very rewarding. It is not for everyone because children who come from abuse and neglect must be parented differently than biological child." And Brenda Denardis writes, "I was a foster parent for 12 years. I loved it. The children are so worth it. They just want stability and a little love. Please help if you can." If you'd like to join the conversation about tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/news at 7. I want to thank our guests for being here tonight. Alex Redmond is the health reporter here at ABC 7 News. Keith Fitzgerald is a political science professor at New College of Florida. And Mark Latham is the director of the Manatee County Mosquito Control District.